Okay, so once we have these kind of lashed on here, what I do is I just wrap it a couple more times, and then I just do a couple of half hitches, and I can seal this, you know, with modern tools like super glue or you know, some hot glue or whatever. Even Elmer's glue will be fine, just to make sure that this doesn't come apart. I don't think it will, but just a couple of half hitches works pretty well. So just make sure that these are attached on here. And then that's there. And then I can go ahead and I can snip this free. And so this is on there like a little helicopter, like one of little propellers. And then I can take my X-Acto blade and kind of snip the ends, the excess ends of the shaft away. So I'm snipping these, let me get this on camera. I'm snipping away these little pieces here, just shortening them up. If I ever have to make readjustments, and I have enough on here to where I can make the readjustment without too much of a hassle. Okay, so now we're ready to align these, but again, this is the stage where you make sure that all these are laying right on the arrow shaft. So next I take my remaining piece of cordage. I can do the same thing. I can just kind of what I like to do is I can just make an overhand knot like so. And then I'll put this down the shaft. And then I can see, let me see, I want to find my cock feather, which is right there. I can set that underneath there. And I can pull it pretty tight because it's lashed at the other end. And what I do is I just kind of pull that tight. I want this to lay down. And that'll hold it. And then I want to start to wrap. Like so. Okay. We should have enough cordage. Yep, I should have enough cordage. So I'm going to start to wrap. And then what I have then, I can start laying down the other feathers. And make sure that they're aligned properly. And then I just start to wrap. And catch them into the wrapping so that they sit down. Push them in there, make sure that they're tight in there. And then there's the last one. So this is pretty easy. It's not that difficult to do. It takes a little bit of coordination at first, then you get the hang of it. And then just set these in there. And they should be equidistant from each other at like a equilateral triangle. Like so. So now what I can do is I can just start to really start to bind these in there. And then as we start to get into where the feathers, we started to get into the feathers. Now at this stage here, this fletching is on there. I could certainly tie this down and work. All we're trying to do, the theory is just to create drag. But to make this all pretty and to have everything tied down and properly, what you start to do then is, the reason why we split this thinly is then I can start to, okay, and so then what we want to do is we start to get into the feather part. What you want to start to do is you can take this and you start to pop it in between the fibers of the feathers. And as you wrap this, you want to lay these down in there. Sometimes you have to split them a little bit. Like so, and that's what will help lay the feathers down onto the shaft. Okay, and just pop these in there like so. Hopefully you see what I'm doing here, like that. And once you've done it a few times, it'll sit and won't go away, and you can make adjustments as you need. Okay, and you can fill out your feathers a little bit. and make further adjustments and things before you make it completely tight. Okay, and still pull this down. Sometimes you have to move the feather over a little bit to make sure it doesn't move out of place. Okay, and then when you come to the end, this is just a good time to finish your wrapping. And I like to go kind of to the end a little bit, and then I like to put in a lot of wrap at the end. This will help the arrow from splitting. If the bowstring is really strong, your bow is really powerful, and that's how everything lashes down. And then all I do is I put a couple of half hitches in there, a little bit of glue, a little bit of pine pitch, and then everything is stuck on here. Okay, so this is essentially quick and dirty way of how you attach the fletching, and there's still some adjustments that can be made a little bit as you see this here. All right. Okay, so here we go. Here's what we have for the most part, and you see how all the feathers are going in the right direction. As if I can get this just right, jeepers creepers. You kind of see how they all spin, right? I get this in the camera. They all should go. Okay, I've got these on here, and you can see how these all go in the right direction. Okay, like so, and they're laid down there. All right. Again, not the prettiest job, but you know, I'm doing this for demo versus really concentrating on getting everything perfect. But this is for the perfectionists out there. I mean, you know, you just take your time and you do it right. But this is just to give you an idea of how it's done. Now, what I like to do oftentimes is I like to finish off the top part of here, and I'm going to do some whipping on here so that this wraps and looks really nicely. And then, like I said, then we can trim the feathers. However, some people like to trim the feathers so that they're coming at a perfect V. Some people like to keep them square and straight. Some people like to do little cool, fancy things to it. I'm just going to trim these a little bit. So here we go. After adding some common whipping to the tip here, to pretty that up, to finish that up, I went on ahead and trimmed the feathers so that they're a little uniform and not so rough looking. I didn't have to do that, and so this is what we have, and this should spin and fly just nicely. So that's pretty much one method of attaching fletching to an arrow shaft. Alright, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to just recap how to haft an arrowhead onto the tip of your arrow shaft. We just got through adding the fletching, which is what I like to do first, and then we finish it off by adding our stone tip here. And this is a piece that I nabbed a couple of years ago out of chert, and we're going to just set this in here. But before we do, we're going to put a bite or a loop in our artificial sinew. Again, I wish I had some backstrap sinew to do this completely primitively, but I will circle back and do that sometime. I just got to get a hold of some sinew. But I want to set this in here, and at this stage is where we would apply the pine pitch. I'm not going to, right, for this. This is where we would apply the pine pitch. We'd heat it up, and we smear it on here and kind of mold this and set this and glue this onto the shaft. So primarily this is what we would do first, is glue the arrowhead to the shaft. Then we tie it on. I'm not going to do that for this. This is just a demo piece, and I'm not going to ever shoot this because I like my stone points. They take a while to make. These will shatter when you hit things. So what I do is I put a loop in there, and I set it into the end here, the tip here, and I let that sit down. And then I go ahead and I shimmy my my arrowhead into its seat, to its place. Okay, like so. So it's sitting here like that. And then what I want to go ahead and do is I want to keep this loop out of the way as I take my longer piece and begin to wrap around the base of the shaft. You want to do that first to keep the shaft from splitting. And then I want to go up, and then that's what your notches are for in your arrow shaft, in your arrowhead, is that I want to start to wrap around and down and underneath. So you start to just wrap your arrowhead into your shaft, like so. And at this point, this is where you can make adjustments and make sure that it's sitting straight and properly, and you keep wrapping tightly. Make sure the loop is out of the way. And then I can start to wrap down the base of my shaft a little bit. And again, that's important because it helps keep the shaft from splitting. If it does hit something soft, it doesn't split your arrow, you can retrieve your arrow. I can go back up and I'm going to complete one more pass around the arrowhead and the notches. And then once we're done setting that in there, and it's in there, it's not going anywhere, then you take your very end, and I actually use like 9 feet. I got more than I needed, but I have enough to haft another arrowhead if I wanted to. Is I put this through the loop and I hold on to it while it's through the loop, and then I pull this underneath or to the base where it was at, and that'll hide it. Okay, and at this point then you can wrap a little bit more pitch in here and seal it, make it nice and tight and sealed. Okay, but this is gonna seat right underneath the arrowhead. And then what we can do then at that point is to go ahead and we can go ahead and actually before we do that, I was about to cut it, my bad. Don't cut it, tie it off. Since I'm not using pine pitch. If I use pine pitch, I wouldn't worry about it. But since I'm not, I'm gonna just tie it off with a double overhand knot. Oops, and that cut worked it. But anyways, you get the idea. You tie it off before you cut it, and then you just snip it. And now we have our primitively hafted arrowhead onto our primitively fletched arrow shaft, which we straightened from a piece of elm. So this is essentially how you make an arrow, and there's lots of ways to do it. There's lots of really experienced and practiced fletchers and bowyers out there. This is my rendition of it. I don't claim to be an expert at it, but it's kind of the way I do things, and I know that they work.